Hi friends, it's Monday, which means it's Book Review Monday, and I'm here today with the review of the Fairwick Chronicles. Well, all I can say is, well, not all I can say. Firstly, I can say is wow. So let's go through the books a little bit more. So first book in the series, so these are by Carol Goodman, and it's known as the Fairwick Chronicles. But I bought the first book, which is Inccubus, or Inccubus. I'm not really sure how you say it. Now I bought this as Inccubus quite a long time ago now, and it was one of those books that sat on my bookshelf and kind of got forgotten about until we moved and I rediscovered it again. But it's not called Inccubus anymore, it's called Demon Lover now. So if you are interested in this book, just beware of that, it's called Demon Lover. And I will start by reading you the blurb. In a town built on magic, be careful what you dream. Ever since moving to Fairwick to take up a teaching post at the local college, Callie has been having vivid, erotic dreams about a man made out of moonlight and shadows. Dreams she begins to fear as well as anticipate. She learns that her home, a Victorian cottage at the edge of a wood, is supposedly haunted, and then her new and rather strange colleagues tell her a local legend about an incubus demon who, with a human past, was enchanted by a fairy queen. ... Right. Okay, so to me, this could very much be a standalone novel, and I almost think that it was written with that intention. And towards the end, I thought, well, I really like this book, and I really like the author, so I googled to see if she'd written anything else, which is how I found out this is actually the first in the set, because at the back of the book it didn't say coming soon, or what like sometimes books do. So you don't necessarily have to read the trilogy, I don't find, with this, because it could very much be a standalone book. So I've written some notes, because I like to write notes when I read, not constantly while I'm reading, but every now and then I like to kind of reflect on the book. So I've got some notes. It's interesting, this book for me skipped around quite a bit. It was very addictive, and I really enjoyed reading it, and I really enjoyed getting to know the characters and getting into the characters, but it did skip around a bit. There was the beginning of the book, for me, was fairly dark compared to the rest of the book. It was kind of quite a dark start and quite erotic, full of quite a lot of erotic sex scenes, not in a cheesy way, but in a quality written type way. And it was quite dark, but then it kind of moved into something a lot lighter and more kind of fairy tale-ish. And as it turns out, Callie is actually a professor at the college, and she is, what am I trying to say? She teaches about fairy tales and folklore and that sort of thing. And it's, when you're doing a review, it's really difficult, because some people like spoilers and some people don't, and I'm kind of trying to do some that's not too spoily. But in this novel, the college and the town of Fairwick isn't all it's cracked, all it's thought to be. By that, I'm going to say that the residents in the town aren't all entirely human. And there are a mix of fantasy creatures. There's witches, there's fairies, there's vampires, I can't remember what else is in this one. But so that's really interesting, because how do I say it? Okay, if you don't want a spoiler, stop watching now. Okay, right. So if you're still watching, you know that I'm going to spoil it. It turns out that there is a door to fairy, or the world of fairy, the land of fae, in Fairwick, and because of that, that's why a lot of the other, like the Fae creatures, they live in Fairwick because of the door. It's quite close, and the dean of the college is a witch, and it turns out that Callie herself is part witch and part fairy. So it's really interesting to see the kind of the dynamics of otherworldly creatures living alongside humans, and so half the inhabitants in the town are from another dimension, and half of them are human, and the people that are human don't always know that. So it's all a bit complicated like that. But so yeah, I quite like that. I quite liked that because it's a mix of different characters. It wasn't just vampires, it wasn't just witches. So that was really good. And what I also liked about it is she draws quite a lot on classical literature as well, and you know, folklore and fairy tales. So they have a place in this book as well, which is really nice. I really enjoyed her writing style. It was a very easy read, and it was addictive. I couldn't put it down. It took me like a week to read. There was a little bit of a slight predictability in the book. The first half there wasn't. The second half it suddenly twigged on me that I knew what was going to happen, which I don't always like because I like to be shocked. But it didn't spoil the read for me. I did really enjoy the read. And yeah, and so it didn't leave you on a cliffhanger, I have to say. It felt like that was the book. But as I say, because I sort of did a bit of an investigation, I then found out that there was a second in a trilogy, and the second one was called Water Witch, and this one's a lot thinner. And again, it was fairly addictive in as much as I couldn't put it down, but it wasn't as good as the first one for me, and I will tell you for why. So the reason it wasn't so good for me is because in the first book, and it did continue into this book, I think the author set up a really fabulous town, and the characters, you know, we'd really got to know the characters. The town was fantastic. But in this one, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but it started to get a little bit far-fetched, which probably sounds bizarre because it's a work of fiction of fantasy characters. But I always think there's like an element of, I think there needs to be like an element of realism sometimes. Fantasy, but you could, in your head, you kind of think, yeah, that could happen. So all the old characters were there, but then she started to introduce some new characters from the land of fairy. Now, each of the type of characters have their own kind of history, their own special powers, their own, you know, that kind of thing. And sometimes I found it a little bit difficult to remember all the characters, you know, all the different types of creatures, you know, remembering what they did, what they were up to. That was a bit difficult sometimes. But the main new characters that they introduced into this one was the Undines, or the Undines. So that was quite interesting. I've heard of the Undines before, but never really read a book about them. Yes, and so the story was good. Did really enjoy the story. I don't know, there was something that didn't quite grab me as much, but it did leave, it very, very much left it on a cliffhanger. So while she was writing this, she very much expected to write another one, you can tell that. But also what I liked about this one is it didn't spend half the book recapping on the first book, so that was very good. It very much assumed that you'd read the first book, which I have to admit I do like, because I can't stand reading half a book of a book that I've just read. So that was very good. Yes, so in this one she kind of battles against her own feelings for different people, and where her faith light, you know, there's, oh, do I, there's a bit of death in here and a bit of, yeah, I don't really know whether to give any spoilers or not, but, so leading on to book three, again, I'm really struggling with it because it was addictive. What did I put in my notes? It was addictive. It took me less than a week to read. I don't know whether that's just because the writing style was really easy, but in this book, very much follows on from the second book. So it follows on straight away, and in this book she has to time travel in order to get answers to complete the mystery and the goings on that happened in this book. Okay, spoiler alert, switch off now, again. In this book, she discovers that her grandmother is also a witch, and that her grandmother belongs to a coven of witches called the Grove, which is a powerful coven, and they join forces with another set of creatures called the Nephilim, and they join forces together to close down the college in Fairwick and to close because the door to Fairy in Fairwick is the very last door to Fae. So together they close the door. But in this book, in the third book, Callie tries to find another door or reopen the door, and in order to do that she has to time travel to find some answers, which is really interesting because it included time travel, but there were elements of the time travel that got quite confusing. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever read The Time Traveller's Wife. That blew my mind a bit, trying to think like, hang on a minute, how does that influence the present? So yeah, there were some elements of this that were a little bit far-fetched as well. And by far-fetched, because obviously it's fantasy, by far-fetched I mean wasn't necessarily 100% believable, if you see what I mean. Yeah, but okay, so on the whole, sorry I dropped the camera there. On the whole, I really did enjoy this series. A really good read. Did really enjoy it. I mean, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads because I really liked it. Didn't necessarily love it. You know, it isn't a book that I would be chomping at the bit to read again. So let me know if you've read this book, these books. I'd love to know what you think of them, and also whether you like spoilers or not. You know, or whether you like to know more about the story and that kind of thing. So there we go. Thank you for watching, and I'm not sure if I'll be back next Monday. I have a book to read, but it's quite a chunky monkey book, so it might take me longer than a week to read. But I will be back on a Monday again when I've got another book to review for you. So I'll see you soon. Bye.